Hi, I'm Sarah Brzezinski, the Outreach Coordinator at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Sciences Chesapeake Biological Laboratory. Today I'll be hosting a young alumni interview. In this series, we'll seek to discover how our graduate students came to study at the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory, how their educational experiences have informed their careers, and how their careers have developed since graduating. Today I'm joined by Hillary Glandon. Hillary, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself? Where are you from?
I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I grew up there and then went to college in Atlanta. And then I did my master's degree at University of North Carolina in Wilmington. After that, I worked for about 5 years for the University of Maryland up in College Park, doing oyster restoration in the Chesapeake Bay. And then I came to CBL as a PhD student in 2013.
And at the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory, what were you studying?
I was studying the effects of climate change on juvenile blue crab in the Chesapeake Bay.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. So how did you go about doing that?
Well, yes, we set up a really big lab experiment. So I collected some juvenile blue crabs from the end of the pier, which I'm pretty sure is right behind you in your background. So I collected some crabs and I spent about 2 years or so setting up a flow-through experimental system in the Cronin lab where we were manipulating temperature and acidity of the water to, we had our ambient condition, which was just pretty much the water straight from the bay filtered. And then we were elevating the temperature and the acidity to represent conditions that we think are going to be in the bay in the year 2100. And then we exposed the crabs for about a month until they molted, which is when they shed their external skin. They molted twice. And then we looked at how those changing conditions affected their growth, the amount of food they were eating, their metabolic rates, their carapace properties, all of that. And then when we were done, we were able to make a population model to try to help us understand how changes in temperature might affect how long crabs overwinter, which is when they bury in the sediments when the water gets cold. And so we were trying to think about how changes in the length of that time might affect the crabs as they grow older and the population at large.
What sort of things did you find? What sort of conclusions were you able to draw from that research?
Well, I would say the primary takeaway from the experimental work was that crabs are generally quite resilient to conditions that we think are going to occur in the bay in the year 2100. And it's not really surprising because crabs live in the Chesapeake Bay, which is an estuary. And the environment of the estuary is quite variable on many different scales, right? It's variable over time and it's variable over space. And when you think about a blue crab, it's born in the ocean, right? And then it migrates up into the estuary. And so it's experiencing a large change in environmental conditions as that happens, right? And then when the crabs are living in the estuary, they're also experiencing a large change in environmental conditions every day with the big swings we see in photosynthesis and respiration in such a highly productive environment like the Chesapeake Bay.
Wow.
So they're used to changing conditions. And so it wasn't that surprising that we were able to expose them to some pretty extreme conditions and they really did okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's good news for crabs. So, I think the caveat to that is, we looked at one life stage of crab and, juvenile crabs have already survived a pretty big population bottleneck by making it to be that old, right? They're born in the ocean where most of the mortality occurs in the population. So if they're able to survive that, coming up into the bay, a lot of the more hardier individuals, right, have made it through. um, people are looking now to try to understand how climate might affect younger crabs, right? The egg and the megalope stage, the earlier developmental stages of crabs that live in a much more consistent environment of the ocean. And we think that might be where there may be some more effects of climate.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. I hadn't thought about that early life stage out in the ocean being one that's particularly vulnerable.
Yeah.
What drew you to the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory and the graduate program?
Well, as I said before, I was working at the University of Maryland for quite some time, almost 5 years before I started down at CBL. And so I was familiar, the professor I was working with there is Dr. Ken Painter. And so he used to be the director of the UMCES program. And so I was, even though I wasn't a student, I was the lab manager. I was exposed to the UMCES program through working with him and his students. And he had a lot of students in the time that I worked with him. And so he was very encouraging for me to, once I decided that I wanted to go back to school, to look at a project in the UMCES program. And I knew Dr. Miller, had met him a few times. Him and Dr. Painter have worked together in the past. And Dr. Miller was looking for someone to do this project. And I have an interest in physiology. And Dr. Miller has a lot of experience with population dynamics. So we thought that if we teamed up, it would be a really interesting project. And so I was actually co-advised by Dr. Miller and Dr. Painter for my degree.
That's great. That sounds like it had a nice balance to it.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you working now? What's your job title?
I am a postdoctoral researcher. So this is it's like a training program that often people do after they get their PhD, where you're sort of halfway between a student and a professor. In my opinion, it's the best of both worlds, because I still get to do lots of interesting research, but I don't have to take any classes. So I get to spend more time doing research, and I don't really have very many administrative responsibilities like a faculty member does. I don't have to sit on a bunch of committees, and I am teaching a course right now, but it's sometimes you don't have to do, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So it's a really great way to gain some new skills and be very productive scientifically. So I'm doing that at the University of North Carolina in Wilmington. I'm working on a project right now that we're trying to understand how the structure and chemistry of the neural tissue of marine mammals might make certain species more susceptible to getting decompression sickness. And this I thought was an interesting project. It's funded by the Office of Naval Research. They're interested in understanding how sonar is affecting marine mammals. We know that there's been a strong correlation with sonar activity and beaching of certain species of whales. And we're trying to help them understand what makes certain species more susceptible than others.
You're providing decision makers with the best available information so that they can make informed decisions.
Hopefully.
That's an important role. I love that. And in terms of your job as being a postdoc, what's something that would surprise people who have never been in that position?
And I think being a postdoc, you can really do a lot during that time. You know, I was able to, so I'm working on this marine mammal project. I also am working on an oyster lipid project because we have a hatchery at UNCW, and the person who runs the hatchery has a student who was interested in energetics in oyster eggs, right? So I have experience with that. I also had the opportunity to go on a research cruise to the Arctic Ocean last May because they needed some. Yeah, I mean, I think like when you're a postdoc, you know, you can, if you want to, you can do a lot. It doesn't need to just be the project that you are necessarily like the grant that you're getting paid off of, right? You can expand to do other things.
So how has your higher education prepared you for the career that you're pursuing?
so, you know, everything I learned at CBL and through the MEES program, you know, has definitely prepared me for learning to become an independent researcher. You know, I feel very lucky to have been able to work with Dr. Miller, and he was confident in my abilities really before I was, and allowed me to do a lot of things on my own. And obviously sometimes it didn't always work out exactly, but that's how you learn. You know, if someone does everything for you, I mean, you would never know how to do it on your own. And I think it's helped me. You know, the purpose of a postdoc is to transition you from someone that's a bit more dependent on mentoring to being a mentor. And so my experience at UMCES with Dr. Miller, but also with the other professors that I worked closely with, Dr. Schiff and Dr. Kilborn and Dr. Rao, helped me to feel confident that I could do my own research too.
Well, that's well-placed confidence, I think. You're doing some great things, Hillary. So where would you like to be in 10 years, and what would you like to be doing?
I'd like to be interacting with more than one person at a time, not in a mask. That's where I'd like to be. Besides that, I don't care. No, that's not true. I got like realistic goals. I hope that I will be able to be a professor at a university. Working at CBL and now working at UNCW, teaching and helping to mentor has really shown me that this is something that I like to do. So I hope it'll work out.
I hope so too, Hillary. I think, you know, you've got a great future ahead of you, and it's great to catch up.
Yes, agreed.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Hillary. And I hope you have a nice day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.